Hey guys, for this activity, I decided to do option number 1, and that's picking an age and then relating that age to the major developmental theories that we learned about in this module. Part of the reason I chose this option is because I am a mom, so it was interesting to learn more about these in relation to my daughter. I did take a psychology class a couple of years ago that we learned these things, but at that point I wasn't a mom. And so it was more interesting to learn about them this time because I was able to relate them to my daughter and the things that she is going through. So like I mentioned, I have a daughter. She is 3 years old. So I just looked into the developmental theories relating to a 3-year-old. So the first theory that I looked into was the psychosexual theory. And relating to a 3-year-old, the first part of that is the oral stage. So that is putting things in their mouth. My daughter is 3 and she still puts things in her mouth and it drives me nuts, but what do? It's just part of their learning. So yeah, for her oral stage, she still puts things in her mouth. The second stage of psychosexual is the anal stage. So that is bladder control and potty training. So at 2 years old, we started potty training, and finally at 3, she has pretty good bladder control and she is potty trained. So for her anal stage, she is potty trained. And the third stage in psychosexual is the phallic, and that is figuring out genitals and how boys and girls are different. So my husband left on a deployment right before my daughter turned 2. And at that point, she was really young and she didn't know the difference between boys and girls. But over the deployment, she was with mom a lot, and so she knew girls really well. When my husband came home, we learned really quick that she figured out the difference between boys and girls, and she, is too old to be around dad now. But yeah, so for her phallic stage, she has figured out the difference between boys and girls. The next theory is the psychosocial theory. So the first part of the psychosocial theory is the trust versus mistrust. So that's just like at 3 years old, she's pretty confident in the world around her, or as much of the world as she knows. She looks to mom and dad for guidance, but really she's pretty confident. The next stage in the psychosocial theory is autonomy versus shame and doubt. And at 3 years old, she's pretty independent. She is pretty confident, and for her at 3, she wants to pick out what she wears, which I have a really hard time with, but she, like I said, is very independent. So her figuring out that she can decide what she wants to wear is that stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt. And then the last stage in psychosocial is the initiative versus guilt. And that is them learning to communicate and play with others we take my daughter to the park, and she is super independent. She doesn't want anything to do with mom and dad, and she just wants to make friends and play at the park with other children. So the initiative versus guilt is just them figuring out social and being able to play with other children. So at 3 years old, she's pretty good at that. The next theory is the cognitive theory. So the stage that relates to her at 3 is the pre-operational stage. So that's thinking in ways, or thinking about things symbolically. So that's relating words and pictures, which she's very good at. She's finally to the stage where she's learned, and she's relating a picture of an elephant, and that's an elephant. So that's been fun to see. It's also struggling to see things from others' perspective, which at 3 years old, she's very, like I said, independent and stubborn, and it's her way, and that's all she can see. She struggles to see things from the way mom is trying to explain them. And then in cognitive, and then the last one is the moral theory. So the one that relates to a 3-year-old is pre-conventional. So that's learning to be good to avoid punishment. So she's learned that if she doesn't act the way she's supposed to, then she has to go to her room. But yeah, at the age of 3, she just knows that it's to avoid getting in trouble, not any deeper than that. So that's the pre-conventional stage relating to a 3-year-old. So like I said, I think, or I thought that it was really interesting to learn about these things as a mom, so that I am able to relate it to my daughter and I guess understand more about why she does things. It also asks the question, do you agree with the developmental theories that describe this age? And for me, I think that it's pretty close to describing her age and what she's doing at this age. So I do agree with the developmental theories that describe the age of a 3-year-old. I did think of a question, and that question that I thought of was, do you think that these developmental theories are necessary to know when raising children? Like I mentioned, it's been interesting now that I am a mom, and so I thought that was an interesting question to think about, just if you think that it's helpful to know these things when you are having children and raising children, or if you feel like it's not really necessary to know. Anyway, I hope you learned something, and thanks for watching.